Hey folks, Shane Getson here, MLA for Laxton and Parkland for at least a couple more days. Here with Tammy Taylor, a local artist that is right on par with the likes of Robert Bateman. We ended up meeting at an art show at Gossamer's Gallery. Couldn't imagine her artwork. It just blew me away. And we've commissioned a series here. I've taken some pictures from the airplane out and around God's country, and can't wait to see the results. She shot me a couple pictures of her painting and the artworks for it, and I'm really stoked. I can't wait to see what Tammy's pulled off here today, so let's go take a look.
And that's this road. This is 562. So there's Crown Land in between. So this is literally 3 roads over from us on that point. And so, interestingly, my son helped build the Wayfinder pit here.
Oh, right.
And he put in the pipeline that went between the properties, and then my husband actually helped build the big it'd be like
The wash plant?
Yeah, for the wash plant, like the towers, yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of cool to me because that one probably has the most emotional appeal to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is the one, I mean, it's all small farms, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, each one of those little homesteads has a story, right? And I mean, that whole concept of the corridors and, when we're up there, things seem so big when you're on the ground, and when you look up, it's like you're part of something else.
Yeah, and I mean, you get I think sometimes farmers are really misunderstood. Years ago, I think everybody had a tie to a farm, right? Whether you lived in the city all your life or not, your grandpa was on a farm, or your uncle or somebody, and you had ties, and all the days where you went out to the farm, right? And there's a real disconnect now. Like people don't understand the farm life, and I think they're really divorced from where their food comes from and everything. And I think the farmer has been really vilified lately. Like, I just seen in the news that, beef is part of the problem for, climate change and all that, and they got to stop, and really, I mean,
All I know is there was a lot of buffalo out here before we got here. Now, there's not so many buffalo, but we have cows.
Right.
So Mother Earth has been taking care of it.
Right. And if you go down south, like there was a big pilot project. Of course, they need a lot of acres per head down there for grazing, right? Yep. And they had some areas, and I can't remember where it was, but the native grassland was dying, and and they actually had pulled cattle off of there. They brought the cattle back on, and it's improved the land, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's just misunderstood farming, but out here, this is like small farms, and you could see them all. They're little, like this isn't big monolithic farms, right? Like this is small farms. They're diverse. They're rich in biodiversity and I mean.
Well, and that day was neat too. It was one of those October days. I wasn't going to go flying. Like it was just bit of a drag trying to get some other planes moved out, and it was actually the owner of the hangar, Eldon, says no. I'll help you. I'll move the planes. Like, giving up for what? Go flying today. He says, just go flying. Yeah. So took that trip up, and it was kind of, the larch was coming out, so the tamarack was out.
They're golden,
and
right?
The colors, right? And then you had the molting through the sun, and the sun rays were coming down.
Yes.
Went up to Marithorpe and came back, and it just was one of those magical moments where you get to see it. And the cool thing with that as well, you can see industry combined with farming.
Yes.
So you've got the different items tied together, and yet you've got the lakes and the rivers and the roads.
Literally right beside, right? Like, of course it's dear to me because this is my hometown, but, so to speak, right? When you don't have a town, but there's actually, when I looked at your picture, there's cattle grazing, and you could see the bales lined up in the field. So harvest is done, right? Yeah. And I love the fact that we have industry right beside us. And it's all good, right? Like it hasn't hurt us farmers, and the land, that it's still providing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's all about, I mean, the land is out here, it's about provision, right? And so I just think that that's what that one speaks to me about is,
I'm sold.
yeah. So, and I mean, with this one, with the Narrows there at Lac St. Anne, some of the things I liked about that one, and I chose that one I love bridges, right? Because, I mean, there's no denying the purpose of a bridge. It's to connect and unite. And that's that's what it is. And then that's what it does. And I love that the distance isn't that far in between. And I love, actually, the grounds on Alexis First Nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, what is more common than that, right? Like, it's their rec grounds are no different than ours, and it's beautiful, right? Like, I love I don't know, and I chose one eagle because, the eagle is the sign of strength and power and unity. I mean, united we stand, divided we fall,
Absolutely.
right?
And they're around here, and also obviously with First Nations, eagle feathers are what are in the address. So we can't have those, they do, and it also bridges, and then also, I mean, the symbol of freedom, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then flying out there, I mean, with the eagles being around, I've flown a few times, and you get close to them, which is pretty awe-inspiring too. Mm-hmm. And they, when you're flying planes, the birds know where you're at, not the other way around. Like they avoid you, and it's great. Yeah. So when you're up in their space, it's like you're sharing their perspective.
Mm-hmm. And it is true, we have a lot of eagles around here too, because the little lake on the corner there. So, and they are opportunistic birds, right? So if we lose a calf during calving season or something, they're on it. Yep. They're one of the first scavengers there. And so, and of course, this was the first one I painted because, you're always talking about energy corridors, and I just thought, this is what united our country, right? Like the rivers have been used since the early explorers, and then the bridges and the rails, I mean, they always follow the rivers, and without them we don't trade goods, without them we don't have prosperity, right? And so to me that really is like a lifelines kind of picture, because it's what built this nation, and it's what unites us and brings, I mean, transportation is so huge, no matter what we're delivering, right?
Oh, big time. And, the other one, too, is the elegance of it. So, to me, again, that technical background, like bridges, to me, they're pieces of artwork in themselves. Mm-hmm. Coming up with the right form, the function, and what they're carrying, the loads. And you look at the progression there, too. So, to your point, the rivers is what we're navigating when we came here. The First Nations were using them forever. Yeah. And then the first thing we did was we started driving in that railroad that literally started connecting our country together. Yeah. And that's been standing there for over 100 and some odd years. And we built out our highways, that came afterwards.
And it's an impressive bridge to cross. Big time. Yep. It really is. So, and of course the Canadian geese. I mean, we had to have geese because that's something it's definitely a common ground thing. Yeah. And so the last one isn't done, but I just started kind of blocking it in yesterday. So what I'm blocking in,
pelicans.
It's going to be pelicans, and it's of course wampum. Yeah. And I think I'm going to go with the power and parks kind of theme. Okay. Because wampum is so important around here, because not only has it brought us power, and provided how many jobs with the mines. Like, I cannot tell you how many friends and neighbors we have that personally worked there for 20 plus years at the mine. And I mean, we were kind of late getting power out here with the REAs. I don't think they got power out here till the late 50s. So, and then the park. And I love the fact that this lake is so big for recreation and the boats and stuff. This is a beautiful lake. Gorgeous. And again, one that's been shared between recreation and progress, right? Power, right? Yep. So I think industry is easily given a bad name and nobody really sees the beauty of it, right? But this is a lake that for many, many years has shared both and shared it well, I think. And I mean, and it's also had its issues too. I mean, like I remember when the train went off the tracks and there
yeah.
was that awful
Yeah.
spill there.
Yeah.
But I mean, it truly is amazing how well it was cleaned up and how well like it is healed, right?
Yep.
You know, and again, I mean, nothing is infallible, right? Like,
Well, and the other one too, it's kind of a work in progress.
Yeah.
When you look at the extractions, so I remember as a kid driving along Highway 16, and we finally got to go there in grade 4. So you'd see these big, massive drag lines on Whitewood Mine on the north side of,
Yeah.
of Highway 16. And then we got to go there as kids and walk up to them. We had our pockets full of coal. I mean, it was the coolest
Yeah.
thing. And then going in the plant, and then we saw some of the big jackfish that were coming in, like through the
Yeah.
spillways in there. It was so vivid. And then when you look at the other side, just a little bit further on the picture there, a little bit further to the south, well, that's where Paul Band is. So
Yes.
they're, like literally it's similar to Alexis, where you've got separation sometimes in our minds more than there is in the physicality of being up there.
Absolutely.
And then you look at the restoration of Whitewood on that side, they've literally, the mine boss that put it back together, I've met with him, his vision was to make basically a park, a recreational park up there.
Right.
So he put back in Finger Lakes along in there. They're actually deeper than Lake Wildman. He's got 80-foot lakes up there for trout ponds. He's incorporated into it, planting back in the trees. Like, yeah, you use the extraction, you use what nature's giving us, and when you're done, you'll put it back.
And it is true, you know, so interesting, like, it's not like they had to dig to find it. When you drive past Wildman on the highway, you could see the coal seams actually
Yeah.
coming out of the banks.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of my aunt and uncle were up in Fort McMurray years and years ago.
Okay.
And I remember probably early 80s, we took a trip there and we went down the river on the boat. And I remember seeing the oil coming down the banks and I'm thinking, wow, like that's a real oil slick that
Yeah.
we didn't put there. It's, you know,
it's
Mother Nature did.
It's just oozing out of it.
Yeah. So anyhow, it's kind of the same there. I mean, it was a logical place for it because it was there. So,
Yeah. Well, I put it to some folks in the States. I said, what you have is Mother Nature had her worst hair day, and she literally had this big oil spill. We're actually cleaning it up.
yeah.
And the reason why they came up the Clearwater River was the only place you could drink water that was clear was at that point.
Right.
Literally because of the bitumen, just to your point, flows out of the banks.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I seen it too as a kid. And so, yeah, and pelicans I just pick because they are, I mean, they are a really unique bird, right? I'm not going to say they're a really beautiful bird, but
They got different temperaments.
they're pretty unique, and I'm not sure how many I'm going to put in there yet, but there is always lots of pelicans on
Yeah.
Loveland Lake, so I thought it was
Well,
fitting.
Ship
to
Lake, there's
have
Pelican
it.
Island. Like it's literally an island that's just taken over with
You
pelicans.
see, we get some here on Old Man Lake.
Okay.
Just usually in the migration kind of scenario. Like they'll
Yeah.
come in the spring when the ice is off, and then they'll come in the fall, like for a couple of weeks before they leave. But they don't usually. There's not much food there, right?
Okay.
There's just like little, you know, fish.
Yeah, they
and-
set up camp
Yeah,
like at Ship Lake. They're there all the time. It's literally one island's just taken over completely by them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But so yeah, and around there, and the interesting thing too is the amount of birds that get these little lakes around our area. Like I don't think the average person gives an
No.
appreciation of how many thousands of birds are out
So
there.
I'm gonna throw my husband under the bus here because he's outside. But so for years, people don't realize how much wildlife we have here.
Yeah.
Like I go to the mountains lots because I'm kind of affiliated with the Jasper Art Gallery there, and I love Jasper.
Yeah, it's
However, I usually see more wildlife here at home. Like we have kids that hunt and stuff, and I mean we have elk on our own plate. Last night I was coming home and there was an elk just down the next court and a whitetail playing together.
No
I'm like,
kidding.
yeah,
No kidding.
weirdest thing. I actually
Where
took
the
a
deer and
video.
the antelope play.
Yeah. So anyhow, and so we have moose, and we have the odd bear come through. We've actually had a bear in our barn eating our feed ration for the steers, and you have the cougar come through, and you have like I said, eagles and stuff. So when we moved out here, Kevin was from the city, and he'd always say there was two things he denied. There was no eagles here. That didn't exist, you know, and elk. There is no elk here, and somehow he thought that I didn't understand what elk was. I didn't know what an elk looked like. I must have mistaken a moose or something. And I'm like, no, there's elk here. I see them because I grew up 6 miles from here.
Okay.
And, you know, we've been here 29 years now. But anyhow, I said, no, I remember the elk coming in when it's really cold. You'd see them in with the cows. Like, they come right off the lake. The elk are here. And he's like, no, there's no elk. Well, one day he was leaving for work, and it was probably 5 o'clock in the morning, and he phoned me all excited. He's like, you're not going to believe what's down at the corner. I'm like, what? He says, elk, like there's 40 head of them. And I'm like, you don't say. Elk. You're like, poor guy. But you know, seeing is believing, right?
Yep.
So we're very, very blessed here. And I know you always say, you know, this is God's country, but I believe, like, we are blessed here. It is beautiful, and we're very fortunate to live where we live. So I think that this is a great series, highlighting, you know, things around our constituency that showcase our history and our wealth and abundance, and you know, and I even think that's a great name for the series, even here in God's country. It could work. That's your saying. You're always saying that.
No, I am, and again, it gives me you know, great privilege to say that too.
Yeah.
Again, when we're out there, you're in the trenches and you're dealing with things, but a lot of it, Tammy, too, is people like yourself, like the amount of people and the stories I've heard. Because again, we only kind of travel around little areas. I've had the fortune the last 4 years of meeting so many people.
Yeah.
And if there's anything, there's a connection to the land, there's a connection to people around them, and to the wildlife.
Yes.
People choose to live here.
Yeah.
The ones that, you know, and here too, you know, folks will move away. Invariably, a lot of them end up coming home.
Yeah. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a good place to live. So I am biased, though, because I have been here my entire life. So.
Well, in my area was back more over, you know, again, we grew up on the other side of Chip Lake.
Right.
So that Aunt Whistle, Evansburg,
Yeah.
you know, that was kind of my area. And then when my wife and I got married, the compromise was out here. Like,
Right.
well, she was a city girl and kind of reverse of what you were with your husband. Mm-hmm. And then, we ended up getting 40 acres and rolling topography and then all of that. And when you go and find, you know, to your point, the wildlife, the water always brings the wildlife.
Always.
Always. So we'll have moose kind of wandering through, and then you'll have deer out there all the time. And you're shooing them away from your apple trees, but it's kind of a nice problem to have sometimes.
It is a good problem to have, yeah. A dog fixes that.
Yeah, well, my dog isn't fixing that.
Oh, no?
So the deer are tenacious, so the dog is working out here, but yeah.
Yeah, we actually, we've always, the dog we had before kept everything out, like everything.
Okay.
Nothing was allowed to cross. But interestingly enough, we had one year where the snow was super, super deep and the deer were really struggling. So they weren't getting feed. And I don't know how long ago it would have been, probably a dozen years ago anyhow. And because my kids were still fairly young, and we had 2 young fawns ended up in our yard. And for whatever reason, the dog did not chase them away. She always chased everything away. But these deer were starving, right? Because their moms were like, and all the farmers were having problems. So like the deer was eating all their feed, and you know, because they couldn't get to food themselves, right? But that's the only time I think we've ever had deer in our yard.
Well, at least your dog takes the exception.
Yeah, for the little ones. Yeah.
Now, and the other one too, that's, you know, some of the folks, and you hear the dialogue in the city and everything else. And to your point, there's been, it's not just us, it's the first time in Western civilization when more folks live in cities and urban settings than they live in rural. And I'm trying not to laugh, but when you've got the Starbucks environmentalists talking about how to save the planet, and they've never grown a carrot or a tomato or seen what we do out here.
I know.
Like the best stewards of the land that I can say is agriculture. Like families make their living off of that land and taking care of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, and we have everything to risk, right? Like, I mean, so it's true. Like, we're highly invested in our land and in our animals. And I think we get an awful bad rap. Like, I'm a signature artist with Artists for Conservation, and I'm one of the very few conservative-minded artists, and some some of the ideology, I mean, it's almost dangerous, you know, but it's so foolish on some levels that you know, you're not sure if you should laugh or not. But
Yeah.
it's hard because I always feel like I'm trying to advocate for, because I'm a farmer, and you know, and they're anti-farms, they're anti any progress, but yet
Yeah.
they call themselves progressive, right?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of a traditionalist, and but yet I think more progressive than they do in many
Yeah.
ways, right? And so I think like for me, I'm always trying to represent the other side, right? And you go to some of those areas and their background is really small. If you've only ever lived in a great big city, and you know, you might not understand how things really are, or if you just listen to the media, you get just one angle of it, right?
Yep.
And I think like some of the extremer attitudes come from ignorance more than anything. It's just not knowing.
Yeah.
You know, like having a little teeny piece of something and not getting the full story, right? Like one of my favorites was these young girls were all upset about dairy cattle, and they were protesting milking cows because they were like, this girl said the cow wants to live. And I'm like, no cow has ever died from being milked. In fact, they are waiting for
They want
you
you
to
to.
milk them, and the milk is dripping. Like they need you to,
Yep.
otherwise they'll get mastitis,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
know, like, and so there's just a lack of education, I think, even in our schools. And you know, to me that's sad. I think that there should be more rounded, you know, knowledge being given.
I'm only smiling here because I heard a colleague recently, so he was over in Europe, and so, you know, environmentalism has taken on sometimes even far and beyond what we've done here, and I see a lot of that creeping in. This one individual came in who was anti-energy, 100% anti-energy, anti-farming, anti-anything to do with animals. So my colleague says, I really like the jacket you're wearing. He says, what is that? Well, that's vegan leather. He goes, vegan leather? That's vinyl. So
That's plastic.
it's plastic.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's always a balance, right?
Yes,
So when
there
folks get on, to your point, this type of ideological swing, they don't know where stuff comes from. They don't know what it
Yeah.
takes to make it. But they want to do the right thing. And part of it, I think you're right, is it's educating again, because we've become so far removed
Right.
from how things work.
And I am a big advocate for good stewardship.
Yes.
Like I wanna stress that. I really am. I am not like this, you know, let's just go tear up the world. And in fact, you should ask me how I feel about industrial farming, like, cuz that's totally different, right? Or industrial logging, or industrial anything, industrial fishing. Like there is bad practice and there's good practice, right? And I am a huge advocate for responsible stewardship, but there's a big difference between that and what we're seeing now, right? Like it is just such a disconnect. And I think like in the areas I'm in, I'm always trying to show people that like people catch that hype, right? I did a talk last year in Jasper, an artist talk, and it was basically how the environmental efforts have been hijacked, right? And they have been.
Yep.
Because I remember when we were not supposed to use paper anymore, or paper bags, because we were killing trees.
That's why we went to plastic.
That's why we went to plastic. And now we're back at paper because it's better to kill trees than use plastic, right? So there is always a trade-off, and the reality is we can't have everything, and right, like, you know,
I'm just thinking of stories my grandmother told. So it was this big thing: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Right. We were coming back, and that was, you know, kind of the thing that was probably the similar ages. So that was kind of drilled in us with kids. And my grandma came up, very Victorian lady. Her dad was an officer in the British Expeditionary Force, you know, all that kind of stuff. So she comes up, she goes, we had that. I'm like, oh, what was that? She says, it was during the wartime. Waste not, want not.
Yep.
And that's where, when we look at everything our grandparents did and some of our parents, it was the glass jars, it was making your own canning, it was
Tea towels made out of flour
big
flour
time,
sacks.
right?
Yep.
So you want to talk about the
Yeah.
very first environmentalists. It was the individuals who didn't have much. You didn't have all the things
Right.
that was disposable, and also that couldn't afford.
Yeah.
So we
Coffee
met-
cans were scoops.
time.
Everything was reused.
And on the farm, we used everything. Like
Yeah.
some friends from the city came out and we wanted to build something. So I'm out there taking nails that we pulled out of some boards and I'm straightening them out. What are you doing? Well, I'm straightening out the nails.
Yeah.
Why don't you just get new ones? Because driving to town costs money. It was all those little things.
Yeah.
So when people are talking about environmentalism, I'm standing at that house, and I've said it a couple of times, we actually like the environment because it's where we live. We call
Yes.
it home. It's
Yeah.
not something that's foreign to us. That's actually our home. And everybody takes care of their home.
That's right. And I love trees.
Big time.
And I love nature, and I love wildlife.
And I've been logging.
Yes.
Like we had sawmills growing. If I still have a sawmill now,
Yeah.
so back in the day, you were talking about the select logging basically, or the way we used to log in
Yeah.
less intensity. It was pretty neat. I was down by Lodgepole and working for my uncle Ron, earning money so I could go to college type of thing. So back in the bush and skidding and knocking trees down, and I was staying with my grandma that time, and I was about 19, 20 years old. And she asked the area the kind of description. She picks out some old books and brings them back, and she flops it out. She goes, "Your grandpa and Paul Cox." She says, "You're logging in the same place they did." And that was part of the neat thing. I go back to the bush the next day and you see these old stumps.
Right.
So that's when you're harvesting from the land, replanting and everything else. So it's
Right.
similar to farming in that regard.
It is, yeah, because you make sure
Yeah.
you're securing a future crop, right?
And lynx and martins and moose
Yes.
and deer and everything. Right? So when you go into those areas, it's not the devastation, the wasteland. I mean, you're knocking out an area,
Yeah.
but arguably a forest fire would go through there and consume the same wood, except we're doing it the right way. You're taking
Yeah.
it, harvesting it before it gets there.
That's right.
And generations.
Yeah, and I think that history we should be proud of, because
Yeah.
it is what has brought us our quality of life and our prosperity. But it's who we are. It's how we become who we are, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's sad that we don't embrace history the way we used to, and that we're embarrassed by it. Like, why?
We have a
you know?
revisionist history.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Part of it too, would get me on the woke topic, and I'll just go off on a tangent, but part of it is the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
History should be written down. I mean, first it's written by the conquerors. We always have to understand that
Yeah.
part of it. So when we got to go back sometimes and look at the other side,
Yeah.
we may have to make sure we do that too. But if you erased all the bad parts, how would you learn from not making those mistakes again?
Exactly.
And you also have to understand that the decisions made in those different periods of time, they were still good people, but they were making them for different reasons in the period they're in. And
Yeah.
guaranteed 4 or 5 generations down the road, they're going to look at us like we were the bad guys, but also the good guys too.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you lose your history and you are ashamed of it, you put it in the corner, yeah.
And I agree. There's a lot of stuff that we can't relate to because it's not done anymore. We just don't do it, right? But and some of it there's good reasons for it, and some of it maybe not. It's just a different day, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, I took from my staff, there was some folks in Edmonton, and they'd never been out. I keep calling our area God's country, unabashedly. Talked about the integration. So I grabbed a couple of them. They were city kids. And nothing against
Yeah.
city kids. But I took them away from the urban city that they're used to seeing. So I took
Yeah.
them out to the industrialized areas. I took them to the refineries they've never seen before. Took them to the pipe yards. Took them to some of the logistics areas. All the trains are coming in.
yeah,
Here's your garbage and your recycling facilities. They've never seen this.
right.
Drove just on the fringe of the city, and all of a sudden,
And
here
it's
you
not
are.
always pretty either.
It's not.
But the reality is we
But it's
have to
needed.
have it, right?
But it's needed.
Right.
Those are the things that keep the
Because
lights
can you
on.
imagine if it was all in the street still, right?
Yep.
I mean,
And then we go to a spot there on the side of the road, and here's the the fertilizer distribution center. And then those refineries we saw that got us to get here, just over there in Fort Saskatchewan. That's where they're taking the gas to make this.
Yeah.
The fertilizer. And by the way, here's this field with 1.5 to 2 feet of topsoil that produces all this food for us. Drive a little further on, get out towards Calaboo. And you got the pump jacks in that light oil field, integrated completely with the farming operations that's been there for a year.
Yeah.
And they've never seen it.
I know.
Like it was wild. It was us growing up. It's part of this
just
thing's
normal.
part of the artwork you captured. It's all
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And that was my hope for this too, right? To try to pick up some of just not just history, but the stuff that's unchanging, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, in our constituency, we've probably been at one point in the dark, right? You know, where we were way behind, you know,
Yep.
Edmonton, even though only an hour away,
Yeah.
you know, way behind. But at the same time, there's just something that no matter what is unchanging about rural life, right? Like
Yeah.
it just stays the same. And even though progress happens and we get vehicles and we get computers and we get all this stuff, there's still stuff that stays the same. Like, you know, we still go out there and we provide for the animals the same and we harvest them the same.
Yep.
And, you know, like things are the same. They're unchanging. And I think there's something beautiful about that. And
Oh, we're in calving season now. Like, I mean, any
Yes.
farm kid that hasn't been there, where you're out in the middle of the night and you're taking care of your animals and you're doing that, and invariably the big tears that come down your cheeks if you lose one, and
yes.
it's not for the profit, it's because you put, well, it is.
Well,
But
that's
at the
part
time,
of it,
it's
right?
the emotional thing that you're also there because you've tried to help this little thing, this nurture this life, and
Yeah. And but you know, profit it is part of it, right? But I don't
it's
think
not a dirty word.
no, and I don't think and farmers don't usually profit much anyhow. Because I mean, I think we're the only business that buys at retail, sells at wholesale, and then you know, but
Pays the freight both ways. Yeah.
yeah. So, but we do it really for the lifestyle, right? You know, to be with nature and to be you know, out in the country, and so
Well, my wife being from the city, like I said, and then we had our first two kids were more urban. Like,
Yeah.
even though my oldest was only 5 when we actually moved out to the acreage, and 40 acres was the compromise. So
Yeah.
it turned out to be 10 acres per kid is how it worked out. So then the kids, it was interesting, the ones that had kind of grown up in the city with the backyard and
Yeah.
those type of things, they had this artificial leash on them. They would only go so far from the house when they're outside playing and those things. The two younger ones that just grew up in the acreage, they're all over the place.
yeah,
Complete difference. The dog's with them, and you always have a dog with a kid.
Yeah.
Keeps them out of trouble, and you know, there
Yeah.
they were. That integration, that understanding, and the peace that comes with that. Mm-hmm. Like, their preference was to go outside and take a stick and go climb trees.
yeah,
Faith, I remember her nice sunny morning, everything else, and gets her little sundress. She's about maybe 5 or 6 years old in her little sundress because it was a really nice day. I'm like, okay, well, it's good. I'm having a coffee, working on something, and then I'm like, I'm going for a walk with the dog. Well, isn't that nice? Goes out in the back, and next thing you know, I'm looking over 10 minutes, like, get out of the tree.
Yeah.
So she's up there with her pretty little sundress, climbing and doing stuff. Like, that's normal. Mm-hmm. Yep.
it is true. Country kids are kind of different that way. Yeah,
Yeah. So, no, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and put these pictures together. And again, I'd mentioned to your husband outside, like, you blow my mind how you can take concepts when we sat down for about an hour and what I was kind of seeing, and then take your own and make something like this out of it. It's just,
well, you know, when I
Just
do work, it's me, right? Like, it's the story of my life kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? There's always a story to it. So I think when we sat down, I'm thinking about who you are
yeah.
and your story. And that was always like, when I work for somebody, that's always the first thing I try to do is like, who are they? What do they stand for? What do they believe in? Because that's what they want to see come out in their picture, right? But we have a lot of common thinking and just common ground in our lifestyles and backgrounds. So for me, this was a really cool project because, especially the one by home and actually, and even like the Three Bridges, I don't know, this is all places that are in my constituency, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is where, and I have really deep roots because I've never moved. I mean, well, 6 miles, right? And I left long enough to find Kevin and come back, right? You know, so yeah, we've been here for 29 years, and like, You know, all of the kids were born here. They've all, you know, this is their home. This is, and it's funny, the first time I brought Kevin out, we turned off the highway and I said, oh, we're home. And he's like, this place? And I'm like, no, you got like 10 more miles of gravel, right? I'm like, but I'm home, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how it is. It's like, you know, if I got into trouble, I could stop at any of these houses.
Big time.
And they'll help me out. I have knocked on a door at 1 a.m. and you know, felt awful because I'd wake somebody up because I needed a pull, right? You know, like it's a community, and it is home. And so, so this was a cool project because this is my home, right? And I've always lived here, and it's my county, and I'm proud of it, right? You know, like I am proud of it. And these are all things that I hope that when other people here view them, I hope that they all relate to them, and I hope they all get excited about it. In fact, when you posted the one, this last one, my husband shared it, and we have a friend that was one of his friends that's a city boy from Spruce Grove.
Okay.
And he messaged right away, and he said, I know where that is. That's Wayfinder. He says, and I know that because I've been working there for 3 months. And he says, and I'm on such and such a crew. And he's like, and I want to print to that. Cool. So it was really cool because, you know, that's how it is. When this is your life and it's a piece of your life, you're invested in it.
Yep.
Right? So right away he wants a print. Why? Because he's invested in my neighborhood now because he works there.
Yeah.
Right? How cool is that? Like, that's how it is out here. Like, you know, that's why I think it's a shame that we get such a bad rap sometimes as country people. Like, we are tight-knit because we suffer the same difficulties and we have the same victories, right? You know, it's that common ground that unifies us, right? So anyhow, so I thought it was cool, and I hope that everybody, even from other areas, could look at them, see the meaning behind them, and not just see just a picture, you know, with an eagle, or a picture with, you know what I mean?
Well, I think, so the artist part of you and that soul and that conviction and everything else, I mean, it's just an amazing talent. Tammy, I don't think there's any problem there. That could be any part of Alberta, and folks would have that same sense. So there's some commonality there, I think, that comes out, especially for folks that are out in the country and do that could be anyone's backyard. So I think you
I hope so.
captured that.
I hope so, and I think I want. I hope that they're important to other people as well.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was a really cool.
And I think
commission.
the birds capture that too, because they get the opportunity. You know, we're land-based, obviously, but they're going to see God's country out there, and people will see those birds, and then part of that too, if you can only imagine what those birds have seen from up there. I think that's cool.
See, and that's me, because see, you know, the rest, you know, that had to be my part, because I had to have the wildlife in there, right?
Yeah.
From way up there, it's got to be the birds.
Absolutely.
And I remember you saying too that was a really cool experience for you, being up there in the plane, and when you see, you know, an eagle on your wing or something.
Yeah, it was unreal.
How amazing it is, and it is. Like I don't know, I'm kind of weird that way, but I mean, I see wildlife and I get all excited. Kevin's like, whatever, it's a chipmunk, right? I get excited. I'm always, maybe because I just love animals, I don't know, but so, and I wanted to pick like birds that kind of tied into them too, right? The sandhills crane, that's just because I was being punny, right? It's because the
I thought it was great.
So that's just my quirky
I
sense
I
of
started to
humor.
giggle as soon as you did. I'm like, that's nice.
Sandhill
Well
cranes,
done.
right? Because if there's going to be a, you know, wayfinder.
It's a frac sand, so yeah.
Yeah. So that was just my sense of humor being punny. So
I like it. Go for it.
yeah.
There was, when I grew up on the farm there, we were out west of Chip Lake, but we had the Lobstick River goes right through our place.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how
That's
many
not much
times-
of a river, though, by the way.
No,
It's got impressive banks.
It's a
but,
creek.
Yeah.
But it's the Lobstick River.
It is.
So I would head back, and one of the jobs was to go back and check fences. So jump off the school bus, go take the bike or whatever, take the dog and go for a long walk. And invariably it'd end up where the beaver are working back there along, again, the very small river. So there was this one time there was an old beaver and a little beaver, and I spent about an hour and a half watching these little guys. And you could see the big beaver was trying to teach the little guy how to fall trees. So he's got the trees kind of falling and off to the side.
Yeah.
And he'd start getting a little bit close. So the big guy would chase him off, and then it'd start falling again. And the little guy, like every other little guy, doesn't, pay attention, went over and he dropped his tree and it darn near hit the big one. Well, my gosh, he laid a dirty licking on the little guy.
That was his dad.
Pretty much. They're back on the side, they're back in the bush. And to me, again, being taught how to fall trees and back in the bush and working with it, I was watching the little loggers work, on the same thing.
Yeah.
It was pretty
But
cool.
see, it's important to teach. It's really important to teach because not just do lives depend on it, but and I see that nature all the time. Like for me, I can relate. Like as a mom, when you see a mother, whatever, even bear protecting her cubs and stuff, right? Like it's a maternal instinct that it doesn't matter if you've got 4 legs or 2, right? Like you've got that, and there's always something you could relate to, right?
Well, the other one too is I think a lot of the northern cultures, and I was talking to First Nations people on this because my background, we're Norwegian, German, and when you put people in northern climates, a lot of the same animals are indigenous, and First Nations people look at it the same ones my traditional people back in Norway looked at. So the raven, the wolf, caribous. I mean, you look at all the same animals.
Because of their character traits.
Because of their character traits, and then you're connected with them, the landscape and everything else. And there's always wisdom in watching them. There
is. I can't imagine how much we've actually learned from watching them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, this is awesome. Well, I don't want to talk your ear for hours. It's always such a great conversation.
And, I know. We could go forever on all these topics.
I just love this stuff.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Waking up the buzzard on an old Black County road. We're just rolling coal.